Gracious God, may the words of my mouth and the meditations of all of our hearts be acceptable to you, our rock and our Redeemer. Amen. I'd like to pose a perennial question. How do we help when we see others who are hurting and in need? For example, how do we answer when someone approaches us on the street asking us for money? How do we react when we see someone broken down on the side of the road? How do we respond to a letter from a nonprofit organization soliciting us for assistance? Sometimes we've already considered this question. We've identified our values, and we feel confident in our approach, so the answer seems clear. But other times, and I venture to say more often than not, the answer is less clear. It is more ambiguous, complex even. We're probably all familiar with this paradox. We meet someone on the street asking for help. Should we give spare change to feed them in the moment? Or is it better to give to an organization that may not only feed them, but help find a sustainable solution to the problem of hunger? Hunger hurts, and it is an immediate problem to solve. And so is poverty and homelessness and abuse and addiction and lack of access to adequate health care. The list, it goes on and on. So again, I pose that perennial question. How? How do we respond to others who are hurting and in need? Hopefully our faith helps us wrestle with this question, particularly when our own answers seem inadequate and the right answers seem unavailable. Scripture is an invaluable resource for grappling with ethical dilemmas like these. Micah 6:8 is among the quintessential passages where God clearly directs God's people in the way of acting ethically. What does the Lord require of you but to do justice, to love kindness, and to walk humbly with our God? In a way, this passage is comforting because it shows us the way forward. But it wasn't meant to make us feel easy. In part, it should make us feel at least a little uncomfortable or unsure or self-conscious. God is challenging us to struggle with what is required to return to right relationship with a loving and caring God. Let's look at the actual message in these verses. First, God cries out, "Look at all I have done for you. I brought you out of Egypt. I redeemed you from slavery. Look at how I've saved you. Why do you turn away from me?" And then the people of Israel, grasping for a solution, tell us, what must we do to restore our relationship with you? Shall we give burnt offerings? A year-old calf or 1,000 rams, or perhaps even a firstborn child? In a way, this seems easy enough, doesn't it? God is expressing disappointment, confusion, maybe even pain at Israel's lack of authentic relationship with God. In an effort to quickly restore the connection, the people offer up things that they think will please God and somehow make it all better. This is a simple transaction, yes, but God's response shows that a quick calculation is not enough to restore real relationship. No, God requires more of us. God requires that we reach deeper inside and actively engage in the power of relationship that is messy, challenging, honest, but ultimately powerful relationship. God requires that we transform brokenness into wholeness by doing justice and loving kindness and walking humbly with God. The question of right relationship and reaching beyond quick fix transactional solutions to repair apparent brokenness is at the heart of the ethical dilemmas we face when we are trying to figure out how best to respond to someone asking for money, to someone who is broken down on the side of the highway, or someone who is needing a donation for their cause. I came face to face with this question during a recent trip to Nepal. I was invited to participate on a medical mission trip sponsored by Global Health Initiatives, a division of Centura Health. I work for Centura as a chaplain at St. Anthony North Hospital in Westminster. There at the hospital, I walk alongside people who are broken in mind, in body, and in spirit. People who are consumed with worry, fear, and grief, who face the implications of illness and the inevitability of mortality. I am trained to recognize pain, and I am experienced at identifying needs. Even still, I was unprepared for all that I would experience walking alongside people in Nepal. As part of an essay I wrote that was required to be accepted for this trip, I referenced Christian minister Frederick Buechner's definition of vocation, namely, the place God calls you to is the place where your deep gladness and the world's deep hunger meet. In the essay, I shared my belief that the world's deep hunger is found in communities where sickness and poverty cannot adequately be treated with the resources that are most readily available. I wrote that the people who live in the communities served by global health initiatives hunger for help, hope, and transformation. And while I still believe this to be true, I was reminded on this mission trip that hope and transformation are difficult concepts. Ultimately, though, I came to understand that hope and transformation can best be facilitated by listening and attending to the problems that the sick and the poor name for themselves. As today's scripture suggests, helping others is tricky business. How often have we listened to someone's problem and replied with a quick remedy that we feel certain will relieve their pain? You know, a partner or a friend says something about something that's bothering them. For example, I haven't been feeling very well lately. I'm tired all the time. And without missing a beat, you say, you know what you need? You need to exercise more and eat well. Then you will feel better. This kind of response, this you tell me your problem and I'll fix it for you approach, which I call the transactional approach to suffering, often does more to relieve our own discomfort than it does to treat another's pain. Parker Palmer, Quaker educator and activist for social change, says, the human soul doesn't want to be fixed. It simply wants to be seen and heard. The soul is like a wild animal, tough, resilient, and shy. When we go crashing through the woods, shouting for it to come out so we can help it, the soul will stay in hiding. But if we are willing to sit quietly and wait for a while, the soul will show itself. This is true even of the neediest soul, whether hungry in mind, in body, or in spirit. One who hurts wants to be heard first and then healed. It is through hearing other stories, listening to their journeys through pain and suffering, that we can help them identify for themselves what needs to be cured. Doing this first step, hearing, seeing, bearing witness to someone's pain is not easy. In Nepal, it hurt to see young girls, shoeless with dusty skin and unkempt hair, in the street during the school day, begging for money rather than being educated. It hurt nearly as much as seeing a man right beside them with misshapen legs using a makeshift crutch, and wearing a sign saying that he needs money so he can eat because he cannot work. And that hurt nearly as much as talking to women desperately in need of gynecological medical care who have waited for sometimes 20 or 30 years before seeking treatment for fear of rejection from their families and communities. Yes, hearing, seeing, and bearing witness to someone else's pain aches. It hurts to recognize the contrast between our own relative wellness and their relative illness and disease. It hurts to observe the economic divide and come face to face with the systems and the structures that often prevent others from having enough of what it takes to thrive, much less survive. It hurts to feel helpless in the face of sickness, poverty, and the world's deep need. Bearing witness to suffering and empathizing with others in pain and hurting because of the obvious inequity and injustice can ultimately break us. Their pain reveals our own discomfort and it shines a light on our own wounds, guilt for our own privilege, shame for our contribution to the global economic and environmental problems, or maybe just identification with their experiences of loss and grief. It can be overwhelming to reflect on how much their pain and ours are related. And this realization can leave us feeling powerless. And yet, it is out of that feeling of powerlessness that we are actually at our most powerful. When we recognize our own brokenness first, before we jump in, before we suggest quick fixes and easy remedies, before we go shouting and crashing through the woods, when we acknowledge our own pain, then we can be truly present to the heartache of another. It is at these moments we see how much our pain is related, that we are bound to one another by a common hunger for love and for justice. Being present to others is the critical first step in understanding how we can help. But being present does not mean being passive. It does not mean standing by and simply watching others suffer. Presence instead is, in a way, a call to action, a call to act, to do justice by discerning how we can be most helpful to communities that need our resources. A call to love kindness by listening carefully not only to others in deep need, but to ourselves. A call to walk humbly with our God by searching for the place of deep gladness, our place of deep gladness, and giving from there. Global and local need, this is God's cry for us, to return to right relationship with God. Gaping holes in the fabric of humanity demand that we must consider that question. How do we help when we see others who are hurting and in need? In a place like Nepal, this may lead to sponsoring a child's schooling because you value education and because you've learned that so few families can send their kids to school. Or it may lead to donating life-saving medical equipment because local physicians have shared their needs, and because you too have benefited from medical teams who have the tools they need to change lives. Here in Boulder, it may mean sharing food rather than money, calling 911 before stopping to ask if you can help, and discerning which causes and organizations, including the church, that connect deeply with your own values. And it may mean gathering people together and facilitating conversations about finding hope, because you hear their despair and you too know what hopelessness feels like. Like our ancestors in faith, we must wrestle with the question, what does the Lord require of us? The answer lies somewhere outside of a simple transaction. Our response to those who are hurting and in need means actively participating in transformation, by giving and extending ourselves to others, not because we feel guilty or obligated, but because we feel glad. Glad to enable change where it is most needed. Yes, glad. Glad to do justice, to listen to the voice of need, to people who are struggling in a world where enough is not always available. And glad to love kindness, to listen to ourselves and refuse to ignore what is, allowing our pain to help us identify our values. And glad to walk humbly with God, to identify the intersection of need, theirs and ours, and respond with the courage and the confidence that comes from knowing how your deep gladness and the world's deep hunger meet. Amen.